Very good evening to everybody and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. It is the 11th of November and the continued changes are showing up across the northern hemisphere. We're starting to see colder air getting drawn south into the middle latitude pattern as we see high latitude blocking negative NAO continuing to establish itself. And there's a bit of a two-part thing going on here. We've got this kind of immediate change to something colder. We've got this big clash zone over Western Europe. Unusually warm air, potentially record-breaking warm air, getting drawn up through Spain, France, clipping the southeast UK, in the central areas of Europe. At the same time, Arctic brand air is coming southbound. And where you've got that clash, you've got heavy persistent rainfall. We've got multiple bands of heavy precip getting drawn northwards aboard that south to southwesterly flow. But if we first and foremost, we'll look at rainfall in a bit more detail in today's video. Notice I'm not showing any snow charts just yet. We are building that narrative as well as we move towards the weekend. We'll start to see colder air coming south. More detail will get drawn up regarding the snow prospects. Just how cold it may get as well will be interesting. But first of all, let's have a look at the temperatures. These are the current temperatures of weatherobs.com. You can see here that we have, not so cold air across the heart of Greenland. Well, minus 28, I suppose it isn't too shabby, but the fact is we've got this big strong block of high pressure. It's actually a relatively warm air underneath that block of high pressure. And what we're doing is we're seeing cold Arctic air getting drawn southwards over the eastern half of the United States. So these are the current temperatures, and while it's a very mild 25 Celsius in Bermuda, a very different story if you go a couple of hundred miles and reach the east coast of the United States. Let's put on the minimum temperatures from this morning, and you can see here that we did get temperatures down to minus 5 Celsius in south central Alabama, so not too shabby at all. Minus 2.2 there at Tallahassee, minus 2.2 at Jacksonville, and minus 2.2 at Mobile, Alabama, and even getting down into further south into Florida, 2.2 at Orlando, 3.3 at Tampa. We did get down into single digits, appears to be the case, and these are near records, by the way, for the 11th of November. 7.2 at West Palm Beach and 9.4 in Miami. Upwards of 14 inches of snow, by the way, downwind of the Great Lakes in Indiana over the last 24 hours or so. I know there's been ongoing snow bands continuing to drive off with that north to northwesterly airflow crossing over the warm waters of the Great Lakes. Convective bands then develop, and with the air being cold enough, we see heavy snowfall. Upwards of 200 inches of snow can fall during a winter season in some of the upslope areas, such as the Tug Hill Plateau of New York. But look at this here, 26, 27 Celsius for minimum temperatures in the Cayman Islands, for example. Massive contrast. Look at that there, really. Isn't that fascinating? With such a short distance, 9.4 in Miami, 27 Celsius for a minimum in the Caymans here. So pretty interesting stuff when you think about that. And if we're just zoom in a little bit closer here for the interior United States, we're talking about minus 5s, minus 6s quite widely. Temperatures down to 0 at Philadelphia. I think DC was expected to drop below freezing. New York City, I think a little bit above the freezing mark. LaGuardia, for example, down to 1.7, 0.6 Celsius. So, yep, chilly enough. Temperatures up into New England here, we're talking about minus 12 Celsius. So, yep, and as we skip out, some of the cold continuing to linger if we cross back over the Atlantic. See here that, yeah, it's been a chilly old day, by the way, under cloudy, kind of misty, murky cloud cover today across the north. It felt rather chilly. Interior parts of Iceland, rather cold. Remember, these are the minimum temperatures. Coldest air in Europe is residing over the north of Scandinavia, where we've had temperatures knocking the door of -20 in a few spots, and then into western portions of Russia. Pan back out, and the really brutal cold, but again, nothing, exceptional for early to mid-November, but we're talking about widespread mid-30s to low -40s in quite a broad area, if you notice here, especially in the eastern portions of Siberia. So yeah, we are starting to see that cold getting drawn further south as the pressure builds up into the Arctic region. That then forces that cold to drop south, and of course that pressure building within the troposphere over the Arctic region then has heat flux energy getting drawn northwards up into, not northwards, but vertically upwards into the lower stratosphere, creating that warming, creating that slowdown in the mean zone of winds. Interesting stuff going on, folks, and again, finer details remains to be seen. But again, play back through last November. Now, I don't think it's going to be just as exceptional, but we've got this big flip around taking place. Warmest first 10 days to a November on record for the UK and Ireland. Incidentally, it looks as if that's been beaten this time around, and it's been the warmest opening 10 days to the month of November. But it's just fascinating to think what came after that unusual warmth. We've seen the coldest for so early in the month of November since 1998. Temperatures down as low as -12 Celsius at Kinbrace and Solent. We've seen some pretty widespread snowfall as well. And, we've got some interesting correlations here. Sea surface temperature anomalies very similar to this time last year. The MJO is similar, not exact, perhaps not quite as amplified, but similar to this time last year. Now, you could say, well, Mark, had that significant cold spell, we had a very mild December. You're saying that there is an increased chance of seeing a colder December this time around. Remember, we didn't have the very strong negative IOD. We didn't have the easterly QBO, and this westward, this eastward progress of that convection over the equatorial belt is going to be something really interesting to watch. Because if we go back to this same graphic that was shared by Christian on Twitter, showing the just bear with, just lost the graphic, unfortunately. When I go back to this here, this is more related to the month of December as opposed to what's coming up here. But this phase 7 MJO, where's it heading? It looks as if it's trying its best to get into phase 7, perhaps towards the end of the month. Look at this here, the black line here. So this is the day 15 through 20. So this is the end of November. We are heading into that prime phase of the MJO to enhance the high latitude blocking. And when you've got mean zonal wind that is as weak as what the ECMWF is projecting, this is setting the tone for the prospects of a cold December. Look at this here, towards the 25th of November. You've got that mean that is down to 5 meters per second in terms of wind strength. We're going from average, even slightly above average at the moment, to very, very weak mean zonal winds towards the end of this month. In combination with that phase 7 of the MJO, that then forces the hand, so to speak, atmospherically. You've got that La Nina combination with a phase 7 MJO. You've got the enhanced low pressure to the east of the Philippines. We've got that increased vertical heat flux, vertical Rossby wave progression here, and then downstream wave breaking, which then represents the kind of building of pressure, say over Greenland. We've got the troughs dropping into the eastern side of North America, western side of Europe here. Remember, I showed you back last week Eric Snodgrass's correlation to what is a generally warm North America, cold Europe during the month of November, and then into the month of December. This is purely based on a negative IOD. North America and Western Europe turns colder in the month of December. And if we go to this here tweet by Eric Webb, it kind of reinforces this idea. And I'm going to correlate the warm and wet situation that we've got going at the moment here to this as well to kind of reinforce this idea. So this is what it looks like based on, we're looking likely in for a long-lived intense negative AO, negative NAO and negative EPO episode beginning later in November and lasting into December. The negative NAO that develops later this week anchors itself into the lower stratosphere almost immediately. That's what's slowing down the mean zone of winds. That's what's warming up the stratosphere. This is all kind of the building blocks to what potentially is going to happen further down the road. But based on past years with negative Indian Ocean dipole, easterly QBO, the La Nina situation here, this is where it looks, so Decembers of 2022, 21, 2020, 2017, 16, 11, 10. Some big years in there, 09, 010, or 2010. We've got warm looks as well here. You're talking about 08 to an extent, 07, 05, 2000, interesting one, 99, 98, 96. 96 is an interesting one. The Indian Ocean dipole here, negative, tends to also have frictional effects in the polar vortex, weakens it. But 96 was the last time we've seen such a negative IOD during the autumn season. So 96 is a very fascinating one. In terms of rainfall then, this is how things are looking today according to the radar. We're seeing more bands of heavy precipitation getting drawn northwards here. And while we've seen upwards of, you're talking, is our rainfall totals. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but we're talking about, down towards Wales, southwestern England, 50, 60, 70 millimetres of rainfall. And there's 79 in southwest Wales, 190 over Snowdonia in North Wales. We're talking about 121 in the northwest of England, and even down across parts of Ireland, we're talking about 50 to 60, even 70 millimetres of rainfall. Now, interestingly enough, this is what the model projects in terms of precip, and I've noticed, interestingly, that the modelling has updated, and we actually have a new, sorry folks, I'm just trying to find, I've got that many tabs opened up, it's a pain in the backside. But actually, I might have actually, there we go. Where am I? Right. This is the total rainfall up until Sunday, this upcoming weekend. We've got another, anywhere from 50 to 100 plus millimetres of rainfall. And so we're starting to see this, remember we're only on the 10th of November. We're already got upwards of 50, 60% of the November rainfall in some of these places, southwestern portions, western portions of both Ireland and the UK here. And with an additional 50 to 100 millimetres of rain, this has turned out to be quite a wet November, it has to be said. Another interesting tweet that I meant to share a couple of days ago. Firstly, by the way, this is right. Getting ahead of myself. So this is shared by, this is a graphic that was produced by Richard Trott, our good friend down in Yorkshire, looking back at some weather folklore for wet Novembers here. So cold December, not always the case, but there are exceptions to that rule since 1950 anyway. 1950, wet November. December 1950 was very cold with a CET of 1.2 with several snowy spells, second coldest of the century after 1981. 52, wet November, likely a warm start to November as well. December of 52, overall mostly cold with a CT of 2.8. 62, wet November, cold December of 1962. 1981 was exceptional, wet November, followed by December of 81, a wonderful month if you like snow and cold, coldest of the 20th century with a 0.1 CET and also very snowy. 1995, a standout, wet November, with a December of 1985, the coldest since 81 with a CET of 2.1. That was the morning that the UK tied its coldest ever temperature of minus 27 Celsius up at Altnahara. I can remember that well. Trains weren't running out of Glasgow because of frozen diesel. Temperatures in Glasgow that night dropped to minus 20. 1996, so this is that 1996 is flagging up. Wet November, followed by a December of 96, a very easterly month with a CT of 2.8. Remember 2010, wet November. It also started off very, very warm with temperatures in London 18 Celsius, for example. Exceptionally cold with a CET of 0.7. The month was the coldest December since 1890. 2022, so most recent, wet November followed by a cold December. So this is rather interesting here when you look at what is going on. In terms of the temperatures then, we are going to start to see the clash, and warmer trying to come north, colder trying to come south. If we put on the European view in the North Atlantic and look at the 850 temperatures here. In fact, let's have a look actually at the overview chart here real quick, because I want to show you that. Is it updating? I hope it isn't updating because I need to watch time, unfortunately. Allow this time. Sorry.
Huh?
Is that us now ready? Still recording though. When you're ready.
Are you still recording?
Oh, when you're ready, I'm saying. So, as you can see here, area of low pressure to the west, high pressure building to the northwest, and there's the situation right there. So 984 millibar low, pulling warm moisture northwards, 850 temperatures pushing 20 Celsius, believe it or not, over France. At the same time, this area of high pressure to the southwest of Iceland, low pressure at 972 over the north of Scandinavia, dragging in bitterly cold air. So you've got this warmth coming north, warm moist air coming north, cold, very cold air in fact, coming down from the north here. If we put on the 850s, you can see this very nicely indeed. And this is going to create some big contrasts towards the end of this working week. In tomorrow's video, we will look at the snow prospects and much, much more here. So these are the 850s off the GFS model here. There's the truly cold air trying to get drawn southwards, and there's that warmth trying to come northwards here. You can see here a little pocket of about 18 Celsius to 850 versus minus 5 Celsius across the north of the UK. Continue to play through. There's that warmth getting pushed off to the east. Higher pressure that was to the southwest of Iceland trying to kind of build in over the top of this low, if you notice, and that could create some not only cold days but some noticeably chilly nights. Look at this here. As we progress into the early portions of next week, down comes the Arctic air, and then we've got this area of low pressure. This is going to enhance the chances of snow, not even just the high level but even low level. That low then moves off to the east. We've still got the cold air. Then we've got a little flirt with something milder trying to come in. This is all the way out to next Saturday, the 22nd of November, if you notice. And then possibly something warmer trying to come in here. So, like I say, we will look at much more details coming up. These are the temperatures on Thursday at 15Z, by the way. So we're talking about low single figures quite widely. Anywhere really from the north of England, especially over high ground, northwards, we're stuck in low single figures. At the same time, we're still talking about widespread 14s, 15s. So big contrast showing up here in the modelling towards the back half of this week. So certainly plenty of things. Snow prospects are increasing, colder times to come, and we will talk in much more detail with regards to that coming up. So stay tuned, like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow with more. Bye for now.